Right, okay, let's kick off then. So hello everyone, we are here today to talk about how you can achieve an A+ score on the Mozilla Observatory tool in order for you to help pass security testing. I'm David Pratt, Technical Director at Zucha.
Alex Johnston, Senior DevOps and basically Drupal developer at Zucha as well.
Next slide. Yep. So just taking a step back, just in case you haven't heard of Mozilla Observatory before, Observatory is a tool which tests a website for preventative measures that you have in place against things like cross-site scripting, man-in-the-middle attacks, any cross-domain information leakage, things like cookie and CDN compromise attacks, and also things like improperly configured certificates. What it does not test for are things like outdated software versions, SQL injection vulnerabilities, weak password policies, and things like that. For those sorts of tests, you need to use other tools and systems. But the Mozilla Observatory tool works simple enough. You just go to the website, stick in the URL of your website or web page that you want to test. Then in the background, it will run a load of tests. And then at the end of it, it will spit out a score and give you some analysis on how it has arrived at that score. And so yeah, just say achieving an A+ score does not mean your site is secure. It just means that part of its security is well executed. So next slide. So we thought we'd take you on a bit of a journey on this talk. So taking you from the lowest possible score that you can get on Mozilla Observatory, which is an F, and then all the way through to getting an A+. And to do that, we have created a demonstration site which you can access at drupalsecurity.co.uk. So this is just a really basic Drupal site. It is using the Umami Drupal profile, and we've done some really basic configuration on that profile. So we've added Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager, just so we've got some external resources that we require as part of this testing. And what we've also done is we've added a cookie onto the site so that we effectively simulated having a session. Because when you use the Mozilla Observatory tool, you can't actually, get it to log in to simulate what an active session looks like. Yeah, moving on. So this starting point that you have, there's no security certificate on there, and there's no other, hardening measures in place. So you score an F and you get 0 out of 100. It's not great, but with some tweaks that we can make, we can drastically improve the score quite quickly.
Yeah, sure. So starting with, I suppose, the simplest one, a bit of a no-brainer. No really excuse nowadays not to have an SSL certificate, but we just added an SSL certificate. You can see we already jump up to a D from an F, which is obviously an improvement. Just gives people a bit more kind of confidence in the site. And then, within here, you can also see that simply by using HTTPS, Drupal has now detected that, and it also sets cookies with the secure flag, which is quite nice. Kind of crosses off another issue that we were experiencing out of the box. So yeah, already had an improvement to our score. Another simple one then is we just forced SSL, making sure that there's a standard redirect for every single request jumping into SSL. And again, that jumps us up to a C- already. So, we won't go through how to issue an SSL certificate, obviously, but it just makes complete sense to always add it. And then moving on.
Yeah, to allow us to move through the scores and get the hallowed A+, we will introduce a module onto the site called Security Kit. So this is quite a well-established contrib module, and it gives you a nice UI within Drupal to control various aspects of the header options that you can tweak. Our advice would be to use this, get this on the site as early as possible during a build, as some of the options can be tricky to configure on an existing site.
Yeah, so I just figured we would kind of focus on 3 of the main areas of configuration. These are the ones that Drupal drops the most in terms of points out of the box, and that allows the score to come up to an A+. So the first one kind of loops back into the HTTPS, is enabling HSTS. You can see how simple it is to configure. It's 3 checkboxes and setting a max age. This already pulls us up to B-, so getting into the realms of quite a high score already now. Only 2 areas that Drupal's actually dropping points. And this is just enabling it so that, I mean, if you've enabled preload, all browsers should know that the site has HTTPS even before a visitor has gone to it. If you don't have preload, then it means that after their first visit, then the browser will never have to go through that HTTPS redirect again, and it will go straight into the secure version of the site. So quite a quick and simple one there, but pulling our score right up. Moving on to the second option is cross-site scripting protection. This is actually a funny one because it's slowly being phased out. I know, for example, Firefox doesn't actually recognize it anymore, but it doesn't mean it shouldn't be enabled. The option's there, and it's so easy to enable that there's no real reason not to, I don't think. The idea being that you're offering security to people who maybe can't upgrade or are stuck in an older version for any kind of reason. So it's worth putting this option in. And yeah, again, that pulls us straight up to a B, is good. You can then see that the one area we're still dropping a lot of points is on a content security policy, which is the third and definitely meatiest area. Content security policy header basically defines to every browser basically where it can fetch any assets from. It means that you can build up a list of trusted areas, trusted sources, and make sure that you're only pulling information from that. If for any reason then some asset was to come on and try to load from somewhere else, it's blocked. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, but it's one of the trickiest ones to actually implement. I will highlight that to get the full A+ score, we have cheated slightly. Drupal does have a bug out of the box, which prevents CK Editor working without this unsafe inline flag. So we've had to do a couple of small tweaks within there to allow or to not need the unsafe inline. And we just did this to kind of highlight that while these are all good recommendations and give a good amount of security, it is also about balance between the security and functionality. These are very high level. Drupal does have its own security, obviously, built in within it. And sometimes you do have to make these sacrifices. Obviously, you just have to weigh them up as you're going along and see what attack vectors still exist and so on. But yeah, we just thought we'd highlight that. And yeah, it's obviously in hand in this Drupal issue, but yeah, won't touch on that too much. But moving on to configuration again, you can see how easy it is. So this is why we kind of bring this one up, is that with selecting a few boxes again, it's enabled. And then, I mean, this is where you've built up your sources list. And you have, I mean, all kinds of tools that can help with building this. For example, you've got this Firefox add-on. It's always worth having a look at that. You've also got a report-only mode that I'll touch on a bit later. And the idea behind the report-only mode is you can enable that towards the beginning so that you're not actually blocking any resources at the moment, but just building up your list slowly, making sure you're not breaking the site as you're going along if it is an existing site. And then as you're seeing less breaches, you can then actually disable the report-only mode and well, start with the higher security. You can see here the kind of flags I've put in for the site that we've set up. And I mean, you can see with that kind of simple addition, we've ended up jumping all the way up to an A+. Obviously, that gives us the biggest jump. We've actually ended up with a score of 110 out of 100. Basically, every score on Mozilla Observatory starts at 100, and then they deduct scores. And there are areas you can get bonus points, so that hence the higher than full score. Yeah, nice kind of green area there. There are some other areas in Secret that we won't touch on too much, but you can enable, for example, this referrer policy. There are kind of little things you can do with public key pinning, but that's more on the server side. But yeah, I mean, that we've there achieved our goal. And I just wanted to touch on the reporting side a little bit more, because this is where you require a bit more actual monitoring going forward. Obviously, you end up with breaches, and this can be the result of two kind of avenues. Either content editor or change could be made to a site on purpose, which introduces a new source, or there could be an actual issue and something's being loaded when it shouldn't be. And obviously, you want to be able to review those and see if there's an actual issue. So you want to be able to get the reports. By default, Drupal feeds these into the error log. We've found these quite unwieldy to look through sometimes because they're huge errors. So we've actually employed the use of Sentry, and there's all kinds of these services. You basically just post in a report URI, and Drupal will then start posting the details over to these services and reporting them. And by doing this, we can also get emails and Slack alerts and so on for each breach, which is very handy. That was a kind of really quick overview of the options that we kind of always enable out of the box. Got some final thoughts. As Dave mentioned earlier, this doesn't replace SQL injection vulnerabilities, weak passwords, so on. It's not a replacement for good code, I suppose, and running with security in mind and running your own penetration tests. But it's a good start, and it's making sure that you're making the use out of those browser-based controls that are there, and you might as well make use of. I'll also highlight that it's not the only way to implement these. So there have been areas where we've implemented, for example, HSTS at the Nginx level. So you can do these higher up in the stack, but I mean, this is very much the easiest, especially if you're new to Drupal and so on and wanting to get this out of the box. And also, as Dave mentioned, it's really handy getting this in as early as possible during a site build, meaning that you're maintaining as you're going along rather than trying in the last couple of hours before going live and building up these lists of sources, which is, I mean, from experience, quite difficult.
Yeah, and particularly if you're using things like AdSense or Google Tag Manager, where AdSense could have bringing in adverts from all over the internet. So like trying to stay on top of all of those domains and adding them to the content security policy is just a nightmare. So what you might find is that once you've got a site that is fully tested and working when it goes live, if the editors and stuff running things through Google Tag Manager or ads, then other bits might break, inadvertently just because of the nature of it. So are you on the last slide there? Yeah. So I just want to use this last slide to point to some good resources out there on the topic. So obviously, Google has got some good stuff on there regarding security in general on the fundamentals area of the website. And Mozilla has got some supporting information to the Observatory tool on its website as well, which gives good tips on how to improve your security posture of the headers. And then, of course, OWASP, which is one of the best resources for this type of information. And just to close, just to say that Mozilla Observatory is open source, so you can contribute to it and you can see exactly how it's doing its scoring and that kind of stuff. So that is us, bang on 15 minutes. Has anyone got any questions?
I did see one question in the Q&A. So do you integrate any of these tools into CI/CD pipeline for analysis? We don't with Mozilla Observatory. It's typically a tool we use as we're building. And then obviously as the site's built, we kind of provide a report using that. We have OWASP Zap, which is an automated kind of security tester. We do build that into most of our pipelines. It basically leaves us alone unless specific issues pop up. So obviously Observatory is a good kind of first level. Zap we use kind of more ongoing. I'll just check the next question. I think what kind of online check are you using? Again, it's mostly Observatory and Zap. I mean, we've had other checks, obviously, with some clients we use like Nessus, for example. But yeah, I mean, Observatory gives a lot of good recommendations, especially when you're building as to which headers to implement. So it's worth taking a look at that. And I think, as Dave mentioned, it's open source there, so you can see the checks they do. What is Sentry? That's a good question. We use it. It basically collects logs, and it allows you to basically assign errors to people and kind of raise tickets based on those events. It's handy. The CSP reporting is just like another tool within there. It's just another kind of log it can consume. Yeah, really useful if you're ever looking at that and tracking your errors and so on. So, I mean, for example, we've got some alerts on fatal errors where it raises a kind of critical ticket, and it helps you catch issues which aren't necessarily outages but might be impacting a significant part of the site.
And what's also good about it is it can aggregate logs and then give you like a count on the number of events of a particular kind. So you can see what are the most frequently occurring logs really easily.
What's the difference between this tool and SSL Labs? I would say SSL Labs just focuses that bit more on the SSL side. I think it really comes down to probably preference. We've found this one just gives a nice, clear grading system, especially when providing it to kind of stakeholders in the sites. I think being able to show we're a B because of this, yeah, it's just the one we've gone with, but doesn't necessarily mean SSL Labs is worse.
Yeah, SSL Labs is something different, really, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
that is purely focused on the actual cryptographic chains of the certificates rather than the browser headers.
Exactly. Yeah, and it can be very helpful in those areas. Yeah. Sentry versus Datadog. We have these kind of. We've generally found Sentry is better for actual errors and assigning and so on, just through personal preference. We also use New Relic for some clients. Again, it comes down to preference of the clients as well. We have tried Datadog. We never really got along with it, but I think that was probably because we had started with New Relic earlier. So it's just really preference, and we've got everything we need out of it. But yeah, Sentry is just a bit better, I think, for Drupal errors specifically. So we've stuck with that. Don't know if there's any more questions. I also noticed, I think somebody asked for the slides. I'll just
yeah, we can share those after the presentation.
I can make that, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll work out how to do that and just post that in the chat afterwards. But yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone. If there's no more questions.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as Dave kind of mentioned on this slide, Mozilla Observatory is open source. So, I mean, you have the link there, and that links to the tool itself as well. We didn't really put the ones in for Sentry. It's quite quick from a Google, but I mean, they weren't the tools we were focusing on directly. But yeah, I mean, it's always worth having a look as well. So it's literally just sentry.io. I'll just post that in. I believe. Yeah, I mean, yeah, so that just shows the kind of level of Sentry. I won't go into too much, but you can see various errors being raised here, and like your CSP alert. Yeah, I'll show that quickly. Cool. I think that's everything. Well, yeah, I did post, I think, at the start. We've got our Drupal.org names here. Obviously, we've got contact details on the event as well, so feel free to ping us a message if you have any more questions.